A few years ago, I learned about this plant sociability graph, meaning how plants behave around each other. This is called the CSR triangle that Phil Grimes, a botanist in England, developed after a career's worth of field observations of plants native to Europe. The way you use this graph is it has the three corners of the triangle. This corner is the S corner, stress tolerators. The plants that are located down here, this list, tolerate stress. So a drought condition, animal browse, these plants survive that condition well. This is the C corner, competitor, meaning how aggressive is the plant relative to the other ones near it. This is what really got me interested because I was concerned about which plants are aggressive, are going to take over my garden and cause more maintenance for me. So this is what got me interested to learn more about this triangle. Down here, the R corner, those are rudderals, meaning the annuals, biannuals that self-seed, and they need soil disturbance to survive. So along a path, a field with a that gets plowed, it mixes up that seed bank, and these ones will survive. The problem is I couldn't figure out how to translate this to the work that we're doing with the native plant work, not necessarily meadows, but for the pollination gardens that most of us are doing. I just couldn't get my head around the triangle and how that would relate. Also, these plants are all European natives. You're not going to find a solidago on here because goldenrods aren't native to England, Europe. They're native to North America. And I couldn't find an interactive version where I could switch out the plants with ours or a North American version that has the same data for our plants. So it just wasn't helpful, but it inspired me to create graphs. Also, this is the meta situation that Grimes was studying, how the plants behave, which ones phase out, which ones uh, uh, need soil disturbance, otherwise they're going to disappear. But this is a meadow that I installed in Northborough and Lyman Street at Watson Park. This is picture of year two. I think we've had year three, and I haven't seen anything phase out, but I am studying it, and I'll this spreadsheet that I'm showing you, I'll keep it updated for um for attributes. But anyway, this is really not the situation that most of us are doing in our gardens. It's more like this one, which is a pollination garden. And I mentioned before about the aggressive plants. This is what I'm talking about when and this is Prunella self-heal. When I got these seeds, no one warned me that it was an aggressive spreader. It belongs here. Year two, it was in the path. I weeded it out, and then I buried this edging because I didn't know how the plant spread. I didn't know if it was rhizome or by seed. So I planted this edging. So if it was spreading by rhizome, by the roots, that should block it. But the third year, it it came back again all over the path. So that confirmed that it was spreading by seed. That what I'm this tool I developed is for knowledge sharing. So you can be informed of the plants that you're going to put in your garden. And I'll show the spreadsheet next, but I did score 5 or 6 attributes, and I peer reviewed them with friends. Uh, so it should, by looking at the graphs that I've created, it should be obvious which ones are the aggressive ones like this and which ones aren't. Now, when you use the graph, I scored several attributes like aggressive, soil moisture, light, browse resistant. But when you use the graph, I'll give tips on how to use them. But for example, soil moisture, this is medium soil garden, and there's a lot of overlap with our plants. A dry plant can do well in medium, and a wet plant can also do well in medium. So for me, the soil type isn't so important because all my gardens are medium. I don't have any boggy, wet gardens that I maintain, and I also don't have any super dry soil. So that would not be a parameter that I need to be concerned with. So when you use these graphs, know what your extremes are and your planting conditions. If you know you have a wet boggy and you know that certain plants don't work, you'll want to use that soil moisture graph. Same with if you live in the city, you're surrounded by blacktop and concrete, and the soil's sandy because it was all backfilled construction, and you know that you put a shovel in, it doesn't look like normal soil with good loam, and you know it's dry, then yeah, you're gonna want to look at that graph for the moisture and look for the dry. But here's an example. This is butterfly weed around the corner. This is a spirea meadowsweet, but right behind it is another spirea steeplebush, which is a wet soil. So I've got wet growing right next to dry, and they're both doing fine. So just know what your extreme conditions are when you're choosing your graph to look at. Also for sun, for me, I wouldn't, if you have a full sun garden, full sun, part sun, they're pretty much interchangeable. But if you have the extreme, the shade garden with, you'll want to look at the light graph because and look specifically for the shade tolerant ones. But if you don't have a special situation like a shade tolerant, then that the lighting I don't think is would be a criteria that you really need to concentrate on. Because in here I've got uh, full sun, part sun, and even some shade things like northern bush honeysuckle, and it's doing fine in full sun. This is the pollination garden at Watson Park, which is right next to that meadow, which is just behind here from that first picture. This is my plant spreadsheet, and I've got it filtered by the 50 plants that I'm distributing in Northborough. And that's an overwhelming number of plants for a beginner when you're coming to the workshop to choose seeds. Usually I distribute 30 plants, all Dr. Jagir plants. This year I've expanded it and I'm adding some other natives. So that's why I'm up to 50 this year. The yellow ones are the criteria that I've scored, and I peer reviewed these numbers with some friends. Each attribute is has a rating 0 to 5. 0 means 0% of that attribute. 5 is 100% of the attribute. And I've graphed similar to that Grimes CSR triangle. I can plot, pick any three, and you can plot that on the triangle. My long-term plan is to make this interactive and available on the internet where you can choose which plants you're interested to see plotted, pick your three attributes that are important for your situation, and it will produce a graph that you can download or print. This is the first year rolling this out, uh, but I'll publish this video for the people signed up for the workshop, and I'll have these graphs printed large and available at the workshop, and they'll also be sent to people who register for the workshops. You can study them in advance. But the attributes on the graphs are height, light, browse resistant, aggressive, soil moisture, root depth, salt tolerant, and hummingbird. And we can continue to develop additional criteria, but these are what I've got right now. Root depth, with that one, just going to talk about that one. uh, first. I actually didn't score this one, but the concept with root depth would be for a, a rock garden. Rock gardens, this is large landscape rock used to backfill after the landscape was regraded when my house was built. And you can imagine there's not much soil down there. So in fact, the first year I winter sowed and put them here 4 years ago, not much survived because I didn't understand the roots, what how important the root system is. So I learned how to drill in rock and I pounded in aluminum rod and backfilled with fieldstone or in some places Trex board, and then I backfilled that with soil to give the roots a better opportunity to survive survive the winter. And I only have about 3 inches of soil in here. So one's suitable for a rock garden would be short roots that don't go deep. And then down here, you can see how I expanded it into the yard. They'll have full access to the soil below. So these could be for the deep root plants. I was surprised that not very many plants have maybe 50, I would say 50% of the plants have deep roots and the rest uh, don't. So this would be an example of how to use the graph. If you had a rock garden situation and you knew you didn't want deep root plants, then you would go to the graph, the root depth graph. And so although the plants are scored, 50 of them, and I'll show some graphs shortly in a minute, but just want to go across and give some tips on how I would use these. I personally, I think height is one that we should all be concerned about. So when you find there are 10 plots created, which are, I think, too many, I need your help narrowing down which are the important graphs that you're going to use. So you would pick your 3 attributes that are most important to you, and I need your help to understand which are the attributes that uh, are important, so we can narrow down and don't have to publish 10 different graphs because that's overwhelming. But height, I think, is something that we should be on every graph. It's the most important criteria for me because I have certain places where I want tall plants and most places I want short plants. I do a lot of town beautification and I can't have a tall floppy plant blocking a sidewalk. So when I'm choosing my plants, I need to know if it's going in the garden with the tall plants or if it's going in the garden that I need the short plants. I mentioned light earlier. I would only use the light one if you have an extreme condition like a shade garden and you want to see which ones are the shade tolerant plants. Besides that, I personally wouldn't be using a light because most of my gardens are full sun and I wouldn't use, and most plants are good for full or part sun. Browse resistant that one isn't important for me because I don't live in the city. I've got lots of rabbits and groundhogs, and sometimes deer. So if I don't want to use the chicken wire to fence off plants, which I don't really enjoy doing because it's extra work, then I'm going to choose a plant that does not get browsed. And that's obvious when you look at the graph, which ones are prone to get eaten and which ones aren't. And if you have a lot of space, and you can put a lot of the plants in, then you should be okay because you can feed the wildlife, and there's so many of those plants that um, they won't eat them all. But if you have just a 3 foot by 3 foot patch of that plant, then it was likely to get eaten all the way down and won't produce seed for you, or flowers. Aggressiveness, I think that's obvious what that means. That is an important one for me. Less important now. I was really stressed about that when I first started because I didn't know which ones were the aggressive ones. But what these graphs are doing is knowledge sharing what we've all learned, so you know what you're getting yourself into. And I'm not scared of aggressive plants anymore because I know the short list of the aggressive ones and I proactively manage it. I use the landscape edging for the ones that spread by rhizome to keep them contained in a pollination garden, not in a meadow situation, but pollination garden. And I can collect seed and deadhead the ones that I know that will spread by seed, like anise hyssop, purple giant hyssop, uh, bee balm. I collect those seeds after I deadhead those after I collect because I don't want that extra maintenance of weeding when it spreads in my pollination garden. We talked about soil moisture, root depth, salt tolerant. This would be suitable for a hell strip garden right on the road. And there's a plant list available for the salt tolerance, and that's the basis for this. Also, I've added other ones I know are salt tolerant. What I see on the side of the road, like Sweet Everlasting, Goldenrods, I see roadside, uh, Little Blue Stem, Purple Lovegrass, Steeple Bush. These are the plants I see roadside, and they all get scored 5 because they're salt tolerant. Uh, what I don't have data on are which ones should be scored 0, which ones are not salt tolerant. And when I inquired on the Facebook native plant groups and asked friends, no one had any evidence of a plant that was installed next to the road that phased out. Uh, it, so most of the numbers, I don't. That's why you don't see any zeros in here because I don't have any evidence of something that isn't salt tolerant. But I did install a hell strip garden 2 years ago using right plant, right place. So I knew they were salt tolerant. I put them in and they all did come back. And then last year I installed about 4 other hell strip gardens and I did not use right plant, right place. I installed whatever I had available that needed thinned out in winter sow. And I'll study that and anything that doesn't come back, I'll score it a 0 because it didn't survive the salty soil, and anything that did come back, I'll be sure to score it a 5 that it does survive in the salty condition. And this one, hummingbird, these would be the red flowers and the nectar producing flowers. You can see here on the graph the pollen ones. Pollen is what bees feed their baby bees. So pollen wouldn't be helpful to a hummingbird. So that's why you see them scored low. And I did score the rose as a 2. I can't remember if I researched it or if I just used my discretion that it's pink, it's which is the Reddy family, and maybe I think I did research it a little bit and find out that hummingbirds visit that one, but it might have just been by the color I scored it, not 0. Now let's look at these graphs. I've got 10 graphs here, and I did PDF them and the PDFs will be shared with people who register for the workshop. But this is the graph one, and the 3 criteria that went into this graph are aggressive, height, and browse resistant, which are the 3 most important ones for the gardens that I install. And at the corner is 100% of the attribute. So 100% height, meaning the tallest plants. You'll see that I don't have very many tall plants. That's because I don't distribute very many tall plants. When I distribute plants for my workshops, each seed envelope has seed for 2 milk jugs. And when you come to the workshop, you get as many propagation kits as you want, including the milk jugs, the soil, and the seed. And the ask is you grow for each envelope you get, you grow both milk jugs then you keep one and you donate one back to a town beautification project in early June. And when you donate that back, I'm installing short plants because they're town beautification, middle of the town, next to a sidewalk, and I don't have a place for the tall plants. That's why I don't distribute very many tall plants. So you don't see many down in this corner. Opposite the 100% would be this line. These are the shorter plants, the shortest ones. So if you're looking for short plants and you're a beginner, you don't need to research 50 plants to help choose. You can look up these 10 plants, or better yet, write them down and just get these 10 plants at the workshop, and you don't have to research anything. Aggressive, the ones up here would be 100% aggressive, or so the ones that are closest to there would be the most aggressive ones distributing. Black-eyed Susan, blue mistflower, calico aster, uh, yellow wild indigo. These are the aggressive ones, and the line opposite are the ones that are less aggressive, the least aggressive. And this is browse resistant. They don't get browsed. And then over here are the ones that do get browsed. If I have just a few calico asters, the rabbits will eat it. If I got lots, then some survive and go to seed. Black-eyed Susan gets browsed. Uh, New England Blazing Star, first year gets browsed. I have to fence that off for the first year when it stays small. Asters get browsed. So that's how to use this graph. And you're really looking for the extremes. The ones in the middle, uh, don't pay too much attention because this is the nuance of this where it doesn't work. It's not a perfect tool. Is if a plant scores the maximum, say 5 for all three attributes, then the math works out that puts that plant right in the middle, which isn't helpful. A plant right in the middle doesn't highlight that it's aggressive or super tall. So it's not helpful. So though it's most helpful when there's an outlier. If it's higher scored than or lower scored than the other two, then it will show as an outlier. So uh, because these plants are closer to here and less close to here, it's more aggressive than the attribute of how tall it is or how resistant it is. So really you want to consult with more than one to get a good picture of the plants. I'm going to go to the next one, aggressive, and you'll see the blue mistflower, black-eyed Susan, calico aster. You'll see those over here too, but just in a different order because they're all relative to the math, how they're scored based on these other attributes. This one has light down in this corner instead of browse. Bluewood aster, mistflower, calico aster. So you can still see them up in the aggressive. So if you want aggressive, then because you need have a space to fill, look for plants up in that corner. It's very busy because I've got way too many plants being distributed this year, but um, that example, Prunella self-heal, that should be showing up in this area. I'm not seeing it just because there's so many plants. Here's how to use the light. So if you have a shade garden, high shade, not much sun, you want to find one of the graphs with light and opposite. So this is full sun. Opposite, these are the shade tolerant ones. These six plants here. In each graph, it has different attributes scored. So whatever your attributes are, if you're worried about rabbits eating the plants, or how aggressive or how high, find the graph with those three attributes, and that's the one that you want to study to help the beginner, help you choose which plants to put in your gardens. Here's soil moisture, height, and aggressive. These are the salt tolerance. If you have a garden right along the street and you know every winter the salt trucks are going to plow because these are the ones that you're going to And sorry that they're overlapping. I can manually grab these and drag them so before they get published and printed, I'll be sure to drag these away like that. So butterfly weed, silver rod, pearly everlasting. These some goldenrod bee balms. These are plants that are salt tolerant. So I hope this is helpful, and I do want feedback. We're I I mentioned earlier my goal is to make this interactive and available to everyone. If you've got a workshop you're doing and you hear about this, I'm happy to make a column and filter for your plants as well. But for this is the first year rolling it out, and hopefully it's helpful. If it's not helpful, then we won't continue. If it is helpful, then we'll see how we can further develop um, this tool for the beginner native plant gardener choosing seeds for the winter sow workshop. Thank you, and see you in December in Northborough and Shrewsbury libraries.